Phil W. Could eating canned sardines or supplementing omega-3s with fish or algae oil cause labs showing high oxidized LDL? And would krill oil not cause oxidized LDL due to the astaxanthin content? Oh, Richard, right up your street, mate.
In order to answer that, can I show you some bits that I have put together on my screen? So yeah, look, this. I think what we're going to do with this, I'm going to run through some of this info, and we can circle back to that question after we've looked at this. Now, this is the conclusion. Basically, this study looked at lots of other studies in regards to supplementation of omega-3 supplements and whether they confer any benefit in regards to osteoarthritis. And the conclusion was that the preclinical evidence provides credible proof of human trials and usage of omega-3s as possible treatment in osteoarthritis. So they've basically said there that omega-3 supplementation confers a benefit. So these were the studies that they looked at. So let's look at these one by one. So this one, the first study. So this was a study that contained 26 participants, and there was no difference identified. So no improvement in the first study. The second study, cod liver oil did not result in any improvement. The third study, no difference in the number of participants who achieved target threshold, decrease in pain score. So three studies confer no benefit. Yet, remember what the conclusion was. The fourth study, no difference. So there's 4 studies, but there's 9 studies in this paper. Now the other 5 sort of show a benefit. So this one claimed benefit. So supplementation resulted in greater decrease in pain. But when we scroll down and we look at this, so compared to placebo, when results are adjusted, there was no difference in physician global assessment of arthritis and the Chinese Oxford knee score or the Chinese arthritis impact measurement scaled to, what was that, short form. So when they adjusted, there was no improvement in this one. So when we come on to the next one, this one now was 81 participants, and this did confer some benefit in better pain relief. However, lack of information regarding dose and placebo content makes interpretation of the results difficult. So that study is also questionable. So one by one, we're ticking these studies off. Now, the question shouldn't be, does omega-3s impact in a positive way? The question should be, do omega-3s confer a benefit if they are oxidized? And I think that's what the question should be. But let's come on to this study. So this is a fairly big one, 200...
Let me recap the question, though, just because it's important. Would supplementing with omega-3s, fish oil or algae oil cause labs to show higher oxidized LDL? That's something...
Because they are oxidized. So they would work in the body the same way as an oxidized omega-6. So just because it's omega-3 doesn't mean that it's going to confer a benefit if it's from supplement form, if it is oxidized. Now the question is it oxidized? And the truth is we don't know. Oxidation can occur incredibly quickly, even within cod liver oil supplementation. So look, the answer is already in that question in regards to, the eating real food, eating the sardines. Yes, astaxanthin is a powerful anti-inflammatory compound. It confers lots of other benefit, but it's still a natural food that is non-oxidized. So it's the fact that these oils are oxidized. So am I against supplementing with omega-3s? I'm not against supplementing as long as the oil is not oxidized. But again, how do we know if that oxidation process has occurred? And there was a study published by The Guardian a year or two ago. It looks at, I think, 20 of the UK's leading brands, and 6 of those were highly oxidized, with 4 out of the remaining being close to being what they deem to be a high oxidized level. So I mean, there's half of the supplements on the market there. How do we guarantee that a supplement in the form of omega-3 is non-oxidized? Well, we need to make sure that it's in our belly incredibly quickly. And the fact is that if we were buying a supplement, by the time it goes through the chain in regards to catching the fish, creating the oil, packaging, processing, sending it out to distribution, and so on and so forth, then there's a good chance that it is oxidized. And I would argue maybe you possibly may be better off purchasing omega-3 supplementation from a smaller company that maybe has lower order quantities and is therefore required to shift that stock a little bit quicker, rather than having to place considerably larger orders and put them into production and then have these things sitting on the supermarket shelf for months and months and months. Eat your omega-3s. Eat your tin sardines. Eat your mackerel. Fantastic sources of omega-3s. If you don't like fish, think of a way to consume that fish. Add it with something that you do enjoy. Put some eggs on your plate. Have a little piece of that sardine or mackerel with some eggs. Add some cheese if you want to. If you work well with cheese, add some steak, and I dare say, add some seasoning. And again, you and I don't use seasoning for a number of reasons, but again, it may confer a benefit to do so if it means the difference between getting in your omega-3s. But do you need to consume omega-3s in a high dose? I mean, why are you consuming omega-3s in the first place? Well, the question would be, I have joint pain. So why do you have joint pain? Well, my joints are inflamed. So what's causing that inflammation? So let's take a step back and look at diet, lifestyle in general. Lots of the foods that we consume on a daily basis from a standard diet cause lots of inflammation. The seed oils in all the foods that we consume, the grains. If you were living a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle, it is quite likely that you will combat in much of that inflammation anyway. If you are highly adapted at living a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle, then beta-hydroxybutyrate production and utilization is increased, and that blocks a pathway called NLRP3 inflammasome. So now much of this inflammation has gone away. So now you don't even need to think about consuming the omega-3s in excess, because even beef and lamb contain small quantities of omega-3. And let's look at the autoimmune aspect. So why are you suffering with this pain? Well, my body is attacking itself. So why is your body attacking itself? Because I have intestinal permeability. Well, why do we have intestinal permeability? More than likely through the foods that we are consuming. So again, let's go back to the grains and foods that are sprayed with glyphosate. And if that hasn't, resulted in a positive improvement, positive signs, then let's start looking at other foods that may cause intestinal permeability. Milks, even A2 milks, cheeses potentially, eggs in some people, seafood. So it becomes more of an elimination protocol. So I think if you are living a strict ketogenic carnivore lifestyle, most of this inflammation, most of the reason that your requirement for the omega-3s may even be resolved, and you may not even have to think about consuming dietary fish. I love eating fish. I don't eat it every day, but I'm a big fan of omega-3s, EPA and DHA. I believe that they do confer a benefit within the body. But if you'd like me to continue with this really quickly.
Yes, sorry, Rich. It was only because it was a very specific question, and I didn't want you to lose sight of it. I will pick up on what you're saying about already not conferring a benefit. It's happened in 3 or 4 of the 9 studies. But can we just drill down that last little bit then? If someone is supplementing, it is possible that the high oxidized LDL could be because of the supplementation of omega-3s, because they're oxidized.
Because they're oxidized.
But the second part, for that krill oil, is that more likely to not be oxidized because it is the xanthine content?
So whether it's to do with astaxanthin, I'm unsure, but some oils oxidize a lot slower. MCTs, for example, last years and years and years. Some oils are more prone to oxidation. And from the research that I've seen, krill oil seems to be less prone to oxidation over a quicker period of time. So that may confer more benefit potentially. But again, if you are living this lifestyle, then you may not even need to look at the reason that I consume these omega-3s through dietary sources, mackerel and sardines, is for brain health. So I'm taking these for my brain. I'm not taking these for inflammation. I find my body deals with inflammation incredibly well. And I would argue that, consuming these supplemented forms could indeed cause more harm, which is what some of these studies would actually suggest as well.
Yeah, sorry, carry on. Carry on. I just feel I was doing my job there because that was a very specific question and I could see the angle that Phil was going down because I know Bart Kay actually did a study with Pim and found that every single fish oil supplement, every single one was rancid. Every single one.
Yeah, so there was another study that I saw published a few years ago that contained, I can't remember if it was 20 or 30 of the big brands, not the one that we mentioned with The Guardian. And this showed the majority of them to be oxidized. And so I'm not a fan of supplementing with omega-3s in any form. But I understand that there are businesses out there who manufacture this and who do potentially supply high quality non-oxidized sources, but how do we know? And it's that is the issue. But look at this. We've just established that living the lifestyle is going to confer a benefit through blocking NLRP3 inflammasome. Healing the gut is going to take away that intestinal permeability side of it, the autoimmune aspect. But living the lifestyle we live, we consume lots of fats anyway, and if we jump back to this study,
yes.
So this study shows that omega-3s can improve pain function, but in a low dose may be more beneficial, which is really interesting. So when we look at this study and we come into more detail, I don't know if you can, let me see if I can zoom in on this view. And this is quite interesting. So with this, there was a randomized double-blind trial that contained over 202 patients. Now they used a blended oil with something called canola oil. Now canola oil is high in oleic acid, and when we look at this, which is this is an investigation into the results of this study, which just goes to show that we shouldn't just look at the results of a study. We need to look a little bit deeper. And if I scroll down a little bit further, so where are we? Sorry, I've zoomed in and I've lost where I am.
Well, I'll just fill in while you're looking. I mean, this is a hot potato sort of issue, isn't it? Because of this diabetic study that's accidentally shown that statins confer no benefit. And I think that's, I might talk about that later. But yes, we are answering the question, Phil. We are. Now, behind the scenes, Rich asked me if I could get like a 60-second countdown. So at the end of a question, we could do like a 60-second answer. So you'll get the full details and then we'll try that. We'll see if we can do it. I haven't got the countdown with me, but I could try and find it very quickly while Rich is doing his bit. But yes, anyway, carry on, Rich. You found your bit.
Yeah, so look, basically, this highlights the fact that olive oil confers an anti-inflammatory benefit, and it's to do with the high oleic acid content. And it says there is in fact rather rich history of oleic acid-induced changes in immune parameters. Olive oil has been demonstrated to result in significant clinical improvements, autoimmune disease, and associated with significant clinical improvements in rheumatoid arthritis. So this study that we were looking at, the omega-3s, and it says that the lower dose was a blend. It was a blend of the omega-3s along with this other oil, which is high in oleic acid, which would lead to believe that it wasn't in fact the omega-3s per se, and in fact increasing the omega-3s that were oxidized conferred less of a benefit because they were oxidized. And then if we look at the last one, now this is a big one. This is 2,092 patients. Individuals with osteoarthritis who consumed more MUFAs and PUFAs experienced less joint space pain loss within the knee joint. Now, if we look at this was brilliant because this was one of the studies that conferred a benefit to the omega-3s. But when we looked at this now, so the study looks at, it lasted 48 months, and it looked at the dietary intake of fatty acids. And they used to evaluate this, the radiographic progression of the knee, they used quantitative joint space width, JSW. And what the results that we observed significant positive results of total fat and saturated fat intakes with JSW loss, which means the width between the space lost reduced. So that's an improvement. But then the last point is the one that got me sort of hyped up on this, because it also says that a higher ratio of PUFA to saturated fats were associated with a reduced joint space width loss, which means the saturated fats conferred more benefit than the polyunsaturated fats. What type of fats do we consume when we are living a ketogenic carnivore type lifestyle? These fats are in the foods we eat every single day. And at least two of those studies out of the 5 that conferred a benefit to the omega-3s is highly correlated to saturated fats over either the saturated fats or the oleic acid over the omega-3 content itself. So from those 9 studies, now we are left with 6 or 7 that actually showed the opposite and conferred a benefit to either dietary fat or no benefit at all to the supplementation of omega-3s. So I'm going to stop sharing there. But the question that, you messaged me recently was, is there a benefit to supplementing with omega-3s? But I think there's a question within a question within a question within this, because omega-3s do confer a benefit. And we know this. They're anti-inflammatory and they're incredibly good for health and well-being, brain function, and everything else. But should we supplement with them is one question. And when we look at the fact that they're highly oxidized, then I would argue no. Let's get the omega-3s from the food that we eat. But the second question, there we are. The second question, I guess, would be if you were living a clean lifestyle that did not allow any intestinal permeability, would we need to consume these omega-3s in high doses in the first place anyway? But come on, hit me with it. Let's break this down in 6.
Right, let's go back to the question then. If it's a bit clunky, everybody, it's clunky because we're doing this for the first time, just for a bit of a laugh, really. So I'm going to do the question, and I'm going to give you 60 seconds to answer the actual things on there. So Phil W has asked, could eating canned sardines or supplementing omega-3s with fish or algae oil cause showing high oxidized LDL, and would krill oil not cause oxidized LDL due to its astaxanthin content? Here we go.
60 seconds and counted. So canned sardines, it depends what they are consumed in, whether they are consumed in vegetable oil or whether it is brine, for example. Brine I'm a big fan of. I don't believe this will increase it, but I do believe that canned sardines in olive oil, not olive oil, but the sunflower oil would. And supplementing certainly will. If they are oxidized, study after study shows that oxidized omega-3s can even cause inflammation, oxidize LDL, and cause that to become pattern B. Krill oil is less oxidative, so that will be a better option. The astaxanthin, quite possibly, but I think the answer to this is get your nutrients from natural foods, consume foods from natural sources. Lots of mackerel and sardines and salmon, for example. Always eat as nature intended. But if you were living a lifestyle as we do, then the possibility of this intestinal permeability is massively reduced, and your requirement for it may not even be needed. 3 sales ago, how was that?
So yeah, we will refine this.
That's the most stressful thing I've had all day.
Yeah. You suggested it. So if people think I'm being mean, Richard suggested it, not, and we've done it there. So, right. A nice, easy question from Andy, 828. How many grams of protein per pound of lean body weight would you recommend for optimal health and athletic performance? I'll start, as Richard's done a lot of talking, and then he can fill it out, right? And I will give you the glib answer that everybody says. Okay, so if your lean body weight, and we're going to just do it for the sums, let's say it's 100 pounds, that's your ideal weight, then you would have 100 grams of protein. So it's 1 gram per pound of protein. All right. If you do yourself in kilograms, it's 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram, and it's your lean body weight. So if you are 250 pounds and you want to be 150 pounds, then you work it out that you need 150 grams of protein. Now, when you look at a steak, many people think, well, I've got a 500 gram steak in my hand here. That must be 500 grams of protein. Remember, that isn't the case, because steak is 70% water. So very approximately, and again, just to make the sums really easy, if you've got a 400 gram lump of steak, approximately 100 grams of that is protein. It's about 25%. That's really approximate, does depend on your cuts. Okay, and again, it's the 2.2 per kilogram if you're doing it by kilograms. Now, that's the glib answer. Optimal health and athletic performance is a really broad goal, because optimal health and athletic performance of a power lifter is completely different to optimal health and athletic performance of a marathon runner. Completely different body shape, completely different bone structure, muscle endurance, very different. One is very squat, bulky. You need big, bulky bones to be a power lifter. And if you think this is really ridiculous, just swap what you can see in your head as a marathon runner and imagine him or her at the Olympics powerlifting. And what do you think would happen if they were at the top end? Well, their bone structure, their muscular structure wouldn't cope with, an overhead press that the powerlifters are doing, or the strength lifters are doing, and vice versa. If you imagine a powerlifter doing a marathon, you would think, well, he's not designed for that, or she's not designed for that. So that's my very basic answer. Rich, do you want to fill that out with the Keto Pro answer?
Yeah, look, I think that's it's a question that comes up incredibly regular. 1 gram per pound is always, the base answer, isn't it? But as you rightly say, it does depend on what your goal is. We need at least 0.5 grams per pound to maintain, 0.82 grams per pound to grow, and that's why 1 gram per pound is a nice even number to remember. But when I was bodybuilding professionally, I used to consume 1.5 to 2. I even experimented with 3 grams per pound. What I would say is that it doesn't really matter if you consume too much protein, because the fear of gluconeogenesis, which is the conversion of protein and lipid into glucose, is predominantly demand driven. It's only going to happen if the body wants it to, needs it to. And the fear of that occurring comes from a study done on high protein consumed with carbohydrate, which in this study, it altered the insulin to glucagon ratio by as much as 2,000%, whereas when we live in a ketogenic carnivore type lifestyle, it's barely, as a whole number, it remains unchanged. As a percentage, it's about 5 to 6%, which is negligible. So always make sure you're consuming enough protein. So to build, again, we want 0.82, but round that up to 1. Don't be concerned with consuming too much. But as Stephen rightly says, if you are a bodybuilder, powerlifter, then your requirement may be a little bit higher. And if you're a marathon runner, your requirement may be a little bit, less than it would be if you were a bodybuilder. But 1 gram per pound is always a nice little target to aim for. But if building muscle is your goal, just remember that we build more muscle when we consume protein with fat. So carbohydrates do not build muscle. They have zero impact on muscle protein synthesis. Protein itself can elicit that mTOR reaction and allow us to build muscle, and that's 3 grams of leucine. which is typically found about 40 to 50 grams of protein in a meal. But it's this elicitation of mTOR that's going to allow us to build this muscle. But we can increase muscle protein synthesis further when we co-consume it with fat. So generally, eat your protein with fat. This is going to confer a larger benefit unless you are looking to lose body fat in order to compete. So if you are a track athlete and you're looking to drop a few pounds because you're running, then we may want to look at reducing the amount of dietary fat in order to upregulate fat oxidation and burn more body fat for us to be lighter and leaner. So context is incredibly important as always. It depends on what your goal is. But as a ballpark figure, 1 gram per pound is always a good figure to aim for.
Can I add a secret ingredient as well, which is patience? Because let's look at that. To this way of eating. I did a fantastic interview today with a wonderful client called Rebecca, and she mentioned Richard and myself in glowing terms, and Sean Sacco as well, the endurance cyclist. And it's heartwarming. This sounds like a humble brag, and it isn't. I'm just repeating. She literally said, Richard, Stephen, you've saved my life and made it worth living. And basically, it is amazing because in the interview, she's very honest about what struggle she had adapting to carnivore and how she booked me for a coaching session and she was very unsure that this was going to work. It has taken 8 months to get her to the point where her endurance is absolutely through the roof, the performance is through the roof, and to the point where it's being noticed by other people. But she doesn't even mention carnivore or keto because there's so much pushback, which I think is one of the sad aspects of that interview. So that's out for members of my locals and the members on YouTube, but it's live for everybody on the 4th of January. It is just of 2024. It's the first one of 2024. It's going to be released, and it's just a brilliant recording. And she's the epitome of what Richard just said there. Really watching her protein intake. Bloating's gone, all her pain's gone, but the big thing for her was her athletic performance, which was endurance cycling, and it's just gone through the roof. She saw Sean on our 24-hour Carnivorathon, which was the world's first live stream that did 24 hours live on carnivore, and Sean was the 22nd hour. So Rich and I were really flagging, and I think Sean would have just got up. So it was great that we could do this great hour and actually inspire somebody. So that's great. Right. So I'm going to whistle through a few comments, Rich, because the presentation was awesome. Cami there, omega-3s are not as good as everyone thinks. We only need a very small amount. It is even more unstable than omega-6s. Let's get to Peter, who's talking about being a vegan. Hi, I was vegan for 6 years, developed high blood pressure, average of 170/90. That's more problematic, not because of the 170/90, but the pulse pressure. The difference between the top and bottom number, systolic and diastolic, needs to be about 40. So that's 80. That's quite high. Anyway, CKD stage 3, bradycardia lows of 32 beats per minute, and dizzy spells. Still felt fit and healthy, apart from the dizzy spells, and not overweight. So thank you for that, Peter, for sharing that. Any idea what causes underactive thyroid? Do you think following carnivore lifestyle would in time get it back working as it should? That's from Anne. My quick answer to that, Anne, was I would definitely check out our YouTube channel because we talked about this last week at length. It's under the heading of blood glucose and thyroid, I think. But in short, what would cause an underactive thyroid? Well, firstly, raw materials being a bit scant. So you need fats, you need selenium, you need certain cofactors, you need iodine to be converted into iodine to make thyroid hormone. So the thyroid can easily store 50 days worth, easily, if it's just an average thyroid. So most people that come from, say, a low calorie or calorie restricted way of eating, vegan, lots of processed foods, whatever, you're lacking all the cofactors that can make thyroid hormone. Cholesterol, is a big part of it, and proteins, obviously. So you could get an underactive thyroid because that thyroid is not getting what it needs to do its job, really is that simple. Do you think carnivore lifestyle would in time get it back working as it should? Absolutely. That is not medical advice. That is talking about people that have done it. So I've got over 500 reviews, over 100 success story videos, and a big chunk of those are thyroid success stories. So, and these are people with labs, where we've actually looked at the antibodies, the TPO and the TG antibodies, tracked all that, tracked the T3, and also clinical presentation. So yeah, that's definitely something that could be resolved. Did you want to pipe in, or should we move on, Rich? It's up to you.
Move on. That's a fantastic answer.
Peter again, 95% carnivore now for 6 weeks after listening to and being inspired by your 24-hour thing. Yay! Blood pressure is now normal. Dizzy spells have gone unless I have carbs, which then lasts at least a few days. Do you think I was insulin resistant or didn't know or want to test HbA1c? Normal, but finger prick glucose levels of 6.2 with highs of about 7.5. Difficult to say, Peter. Probably on the vegan diet. My short answer would be just probably nutrient deficient in the long run. All of those things, plenty of reasons. Possibly too much water retention and electrolyte imbalance because of that. There's lots of reasons why vegans don't thrive. Lack of B12 after a long period of time. Although B12 is one of those, that it can be stored for a long period of time. I mean, B12 can knock around for quite a few years, and 5 years is about the maximum I've heard, but eventually it depletes. Normally for people, it depletes after about 3 years, and then if you're not supplementing with B12, you start getting problems. In case you want to hear other live streams we do, Richard will now tell you about some.
The live on Mighty Networks every Monday. So Stephen and I go live in our private group on Mighty Networks between 5 and 5:30. So we're available there on a private Zoom session for questions. It's free to join. So we'll pop a link in the comments later. So feel free to join that and join our Zoom there. There's lots going on, isn't there? And we also go live with Jonathan and others on Tuesday during the Carnivore Team GB live. That's Tuesday at 7 p.m.
I think one of the things Rich said there about differences of opinion, there will always be differences of opinion because we've all got slightly different life experience. There might be influencers out there who just stone cold think you can't reverse your thyroid. And when I was a high carb personal trainer, I'd never got anyone to reverse their diabetes or reverse their thyroid problems. Well, I see that all the time now. So Tom and Jay there, thank you. Catching up on the stream from the beginning. You should close all those tabs in your internet browser, Stephen. They're eating up your memory. Yes, I agree.
Or the tabs in my internet browser, maybe, when I was doing it.
Once a week, man, I heard a good nutritionist suggest that even on a carnivore diet, we should eat some sunflower seeds to get a good level of vitamin E.
So sunflower seeds are incredibly high in phytic acid and lectins. Phytic acid and lectins can block the absorption of things like zinc, iron, magnesium by as much as 100%. Zinc, iron, magnesium are cofactors, essential cofactors in the production of our neurotransmitters, and even methylation, which allows us to do thousands of chemical reactions within the body, even the production of DNA. So we can get vitamin E through the food, through the meat that we eat. And plenty of it as well. We don't need to consume anti-nutrients in the form of phytic acid and lectins, and this is what people seem to forget. Lots of the vitamins and minerals in plants are not actually vitamins. Vitamin E is an exception, mind, that is found in high quantities in plants, but then you need to look at the bioavailability because of the fiber and, again, the phytic acid and lectin content. But generally, the vitamin and mineral profile in plants isn't in human form, and so they're not as bioavailable as one would believe. But no, I completely disagree with that. There's worse things to be eating. If you were living a carnivore lifestyle and eating sunflower seeds, then you could still be thriving. They may not be harming or appear to harm in any way, but the question is it optimal? And I would argue not. You do not need to supplement with sunflower seeds.
No, I wouldn't do that. But yes, he wasn't saying he did, by the way. He was just saying a good nutritionist recommended it. Carnivore muscle, omega-3 is well retained after cooking. Same with vitamin C. Burning it, however, no. And apparently, Jonathan has found 2 fish oil supplements that aren't rancid. So that might be something we'd look into. And we've got, backing up Mike there is omega-6 in meat, grain fed, but still compared to my ratios before carnivore, it's way, way better. And actually, I mean, omega-6s are not a bad guy. It's just a bit like insulin, it's that ratio. You need some omega-6s. It's just you don't want lots of them and lots more than say you omega-3.
As you say, it's that ratio. And coming back to what Cammy said, excess amounts of omega-3s may actually show harm, which comes back to the whole ratio thing. If we're consuming a lot less omega-6, then our requirement for omega-3 it also comes down. Interestingly, Patrick Holford, one of the UK's leading experts in dementia, is a big supporter of EPA and DHA, particularly DHA, and he supplements with lots of it. And one of the guys that he references, one of the professors he worked with, say that we need stupid amounts of this omega-3, which is interesting because Patrick Holford is incredibly knowledgeable, and I respect his opinion. So again, this is two. Well, and we're all in the same space. We all work within this, and we all agree on the same things in regards to nutrition. But he opts for a lot higher omega-3s, and he would argue, in fact, that in the UK we would have eaten more seafood than land animals potentially, because we were on the seafront, and lots. He references studies that show that we may have consumed considerably higher intakes of omega-3s through seafood. So I think location is incredibly important as well, where we have evolved from. We're all human, but I believe that we are all different, and our requirements could be different depending on genetics, and that comes from where we have evolved from historically. So it's in the UK, possibly our requirement for omega-3s is higher. And he goes into a lot of detail in this in the chat that I added in. So we'll have to try to get him on one night, I think, Steve, and we can go through this omega-3 debate, because it's incredibly interesting, isn't it, with all of these differences in the beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Just trying to catch up. Apparently, you're the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Explain, which is very good. We're getting up to messages that were posted at 7:30, so we're trying to catch up.
20 minutes behind.
Landers, do you believe or know that working above your heart rate max is dangerous? Where do you both stand on using the Karvonen formula for aerobic training? Right, working above your heart rate max is dangerous. In the UK, Rich doesn't know this. I'm going to tell him something he doesn't know. Right. In the UK, before they released the show, The American Gladiators, but doing it in the UK, so I guess it was the British Gladiators, I tried out as a contestant. And because I was super fit, super fit. And I was a school 800-meter runner record holder, but I hadn't run 800 meters particularly fast at that period of time. So I was trying out as a contestant, not to be a gladiator. And I had somebody going around with me, stopwatch. We were doing all sort of different things to see if I'd be good enough for the show. And we got to the treadmill, and they said, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what the time was, but they said, if you do this and this time, they had a display on there, you'll be on the show. So I went for it, and I could feel that I was pushing myself too hard, and I did a stupid thing, and I didn't listen to my heart. And I remember waking up with the St. John's ambulance team around me, super sweating, and thinking I was going to die. Literally, I was freezing. I was super sweating. I was covered in sort of like the stuff they put around roast chickens, the kitchen foil thing. And my heart rate would not come down. It was absolutely hyperventilating. It was the scariest thing in the world for me at that particular point. I was 23. And I had an ECG afterwards later on, and it was all fine and everything was great and dandy. But it was one of those things, because I sort of thought I was pushing myself, but I went above that. And then this was before wearing all the wearables, and I just go in by instinct. Right. Is it dangerous? Yes, because you could die. I mean, you could. or you could do some irreparable damage. But your body stops you. And that's the other point I was going to make, because I wanted to go on, and the next thing I know, I'm collapsed and I've stopped. And there was just a couple of fuzzy moments where I don't know what happened. So your body does stop you doing very stupid things. It does stop you in different ways, physiological ways, those sort of things. As for the formula, for your maximum heart rate, it's fine. It's one of those things where you get your target heart rate is your 220 minus your person's age. So because I'm nearly 60, so my heart rate would be 220 minus 60 because I'm 60 years old. It's not the most nuanced way of doing it, but so my maximum heart rate would be 160 because that plus 60 is 220. So that's it. That's pretty much it. And then there are other nuances around that. Where do I stand on it? I think it's just a good jumping point, but I don't get into all that personally. I think you should just listen to your body. If you're doing anything, you listen to when you're fatigued, and if you want to improve, you record whatever you're doing, and the next time you do it, you either do it quicker, faster, with better technique, and you progress. I don't get too much into the metrics too much. Now, that was even when I was training somebody in the Olympics who was a javelin thrower, because in the end, right, the best thing is for her to throw the javelin as far as possible. That was it. So we worked on that. This is the one that was type 1 diabetic, so it was, it ticked a lot of boxes for me, my qualifications. And yeah, we were doing lots of metrics. We were looking at blood glucose and all that. But in the end, we got more results from going back to being old school and going out in the field and throwing javelins. That was it. But measuring and looking at the form, doing videos and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, we didn't do heart rates. We didn't do that. So I know it's not an aerobic thing, but anyway, I'm very old school. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, look, I'm torn when it comes to things like this, because I think you should always listen to your body. It's one of the quickest ways to upregulate the monocarboxylate transporters is by doing high intensity work, but then you're more prone to injury. Now, I always try to work on numbers, but what I found is when I ran the Cardiff Half Marathon recently, my heart rate when I started was 186. Which was higher than my highest heart rate during the Swansea Bay 10K, which I ran much quicker at a much quicker pace 2 weeks prior. But I felt good. So despite my heart rate being through the roof, I had a good run. At the times I've gone out, my heart rate has been really low and I've really struggled. So I think looking at the numbers is always important to analyze the data, but I think you should go by feel. What I personally try to do is I try to do a portion of my training, the majority of my training in a zone 2. When it comes to running, now that said, I think there's a benefit to increasing that 80-20 ratio, which everyone else sort of touts out. I think maybe we should be doing the split 50-50. Zone 2 compared to zone 5, but it depends on whether your joints are going to take that impact. But that does seem to work well for me when I'm cycling. So this is what I do. I do one hard session and one easy session. It's a little bit more difficult when it comes to running, but listen to your body, track the data. It's fantastic, but again, if you want to improve something, you've got to do it as well, haven't you? But injury is what seems to slow me down. I seem to get injured a lot because of the intensity and the frequency and the volume that I've implemented since I've been running. I've started running from nothing, and I could barely run 1.5K, and my first 5K took me 42 minutes. And within weeks, I was doing a sub 25K, and then I was running 10K and half marathons, and I was doing speed work, and I injured, and I was out of action for nearly 6 months. So listen to your body, and I think that's the best advice I can probably give. I jumped on Zwift this week, and I jumped on with a friend of mine, James Curtis. we had a blast on Zwift, and I struggled. He crippled me. And it was a good ride. And my heart rate was low, but my output was also low. But as in the watts that I was putting out. But it hurt. It hurt a lot. And 2 days later, I jumped back on, and I thought it was incredibly easy. You know, I was flying on the bike. My watts per kilogram were through the roof. And when I looked at my heart rate after, my heart rate was through the roof, but I felt fine. So my heart rate was one of the highest heart rates that I'd ever put out on the bike, but I felt fine. And I also smashed my FTP. I came out with an FTP of 280, which gives me a 4 watt per kilogram output, which is a lot higher than I've ever done before. Yet, it was one of the easier workouts that I've ever done. So I think you need to listen to your body. Listen to your body. It's the best advice that I can give.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So in the chat, if I'm sounding a bit brusque and a bit rude there, it's because at 8 o'clock we're over on the other platform. So the one that rhymes with Apple Crumble, and I put the link in there. The first link I put in there, for some reason, cut off the end. So just look for the second link under Matthew's thumbs up, and we'll be there at 8 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for joining. There was one question or two questions that we've missed. Sorry, because we did that presentation. It's not a big problem. I hope you can always come back next week. But it is the quick questions were, Matthew asked, does cod liver oil oxidize the same as other fish oils? I'm assuming, Richard, that's probably true.
So, sorry, Steve, say it again.
Yes, Matthew was asking, does cod liver oil oxidize the same as other fish oils?
Well, again, I mean, we were looking at the oxidation of krill oils and things, and they do seem to be slower, but all oils oxidize eventually. You know, it's just some are more prone to oxidation. Look, eat your fish. If you want to get omega-3s, it's in beef and lamb anyway. And again, as Cami said, you know, there's potential research which indicates that excess consumption could be detrimental. But as you've reiterated several times, it's that ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. If we're not consuming an awful lot of omega-6, we need less omega-3s. But if you are going to put it in and you're concerned, then eat your omega-3s. Have some salmon, sardines, or mackerel, you know, and get it fresh. This thing about frozen, that Kanye mentioned earlier, I think context is important. It depends when it's frozen. You know, quite often some of the fresh fish you buy, you know, in the supermarket may be more oxidized than the fresh fish that's frozen because it's frozen sooner. So there we are. Yes, I know we're running out of time, but it's
and we got 40 seconds for Maria. Maybe come back next week. We'll give you a much better answer. Why women? Why do women do better when on significantly higher fat carnivore? Simple answer is because women need more fat. Even on body composition, they need more fat. And that could be down to things like thyroid demanding so many fats as cofactors for hormones, different things happening to you when you have your cycle. Obviously, you lose a lot of iron at least once every month. So you have to produce a lot more blood. There's so many different things, but it is literally down to the fact that women tend to need more fats. It's really that simple. So, right, we will see you on the other platform.